Hey everyone, welcome to the Spark Business Institute's Reigniting Small Business podcast. I'm Laura Richards, and today I'm here with Patrick Lee, CEO of Spark Business Institute. And we're going to talk today about an industry who has had a lot of trials and tribulations and hardships over the last decade and even more. Some farms, we're talking about farms today, are adapting and pivoting in the pandemic, and have they been able to embrace change and move the needle and survive the pandemic. But Patrick, I wanted you to kind of frame the dynamics that are facing farmers, even prior to the pandemic. And let's talk about that for a little bit before we talk about what some of the innovations are that are going on in the industry as well.
Sure. And we need to be real specific here. We are talking about family farms. We've seen a lot happen to our food production industry and farms in general over the last few decades. And I think a lot of that information has been challenging or negative. You've seen all of what happens with climate change, all the weather issues. There's the whole issue of pricing and the bureaucratization of these family farms, the bureaucratization of how things are priced. And you never want as much bureaucracy and government control over an industry to make that industry efficient or effective. And farming has a lot of it. And then you've got the current, trade wars going on and how that's affecting the farmers. And one of the reasons why this topic even came up was we were looking at headlines of, the suicide rates that are happening during this whole pandemic and all, and how farmers seem to be a industry cluster. There seems to be quite a bit of upswing in farmer suicides. And there's some organizations that have actually started being formed to deal specifically with farmers and suicide. So there was a whole sort of framework of negative that sort of sits in the farming thing. And then you look at the factory farming element, right? The family farms, moving from being a family farm and then being, co-ops, where they're grouping together to sell and all, to where large conglomerates actually are almost employing the family farmer, that they're totally at the mercy of a larger entity controlling what they're going to get paid and what they're told to grow, et cetera. And you also then have things like the corporatization of farming, where you've got, companies like Monsanto who are patenting seed varietals. And then when those, the wind takes some of those seeds and blows them into a neighboring family farm's fields and they grow, suing them, right? So it has that sense of, who would want to be in farming, right? But one of the things I think that started happening here during the pandemic, and was happening before this, but we're starting to see it accelerate, is farmers are resilient, and they started coming up with all sorts of things to sort of shift this to, sustainable local farming, CSAs, other things like that I think are worth looking at, because it's very adaptive and it's, I think, brought some hope to an industry that, as we said, feels like it's been beaten about a bit.
Patrick, I think that is just such an excellent point, because for us to talk about it in a vacuum without talking about the hardships farms are facing would be, not the right thing. So let's talk about the silver lining of what's going on with farming in the pandemic. So, I would ask people watching, how many folks have been out there buying local since the pandemic? I know in our household, we visited the local farmers markets, found new ones actually during the pandemic. I joined a CSA locally for the first time. I had never done that before. I had friends that were picking up produce boxes that they did directly from the restaurants. So I can speak personally by some of these programs that touched my life that I probably wouldn't have considered prior to being homebound.
And that's so interesting too, because what sort of almost happened here is is we're not out eating at restaurants and we're avoiding the large crowds. So do you really want to go to the supermarket? How's that going to work? All the delivery of foods to your door now. Well, it seems like such a natural and easy fit to combine these things, right? Because let's go to the farmer's market. It's outside. Everyone's telling us to be outside, right? It's something to do. It's not just where we're going to get our food. It's almost, entertainment, like something, let's get out of the house. And we are all having to entertain ourselves around food. We can't go to the restaurant and order this or that. For quite a bit of time, you couldn't go at all. Now it's very limited. So we gotta make all those recipes. And if we're going to make those recipes, what's that weird ingredient listed in that recipe? Where are we going to find it?
Exactly.
Go to the farmers.
Exactly. So this whole idea about being more self-reliant and has really helped people to hone in on how being local can impact their community. And that's not just in the farming industry, but obviously, in all small businesses locally, we're seeing, a swell of support. So what's interesting is that some farmers have reported that by selling to people as opposed to selling to restaurants, revenues are close to an all-time high. So farmers in Illinois are one example who have said that, selling direct to the individual has really helped their numbers.
Well, what's really interesting about this is something that is pre-pandemic, right? I'm not sure. I think the pandemic and how all this has worked has brought it sort of to a universal understanding of all the farmers markets and communities and all. But I have a specific story of Louisville, Kentucky, and Lancaster County, of how they had started a farmers market in the city, and they did that because they wanted to sort of try to bring the urban and rural environments together and have the people interact. And it had this real sort of nice feel to it, like let's do this nice thing, bring healthy food into the urban area, kind of sensibility. And so they got it all set up. They got the permits. They got the space. They did the whole thing, and then they went to the actual Kentucky farmers around the area, and they said, "Do you want to be part of this?" And the Kentucky farmers were like, "No, it's a waste of time. We don't want to do that." Right? So then they're like, "Oh my gosh, our idea is going downhill if we can't figure this out." So they sort of branched out a little bit further, and they ended up talking to some Southern Indiana farmers, so across the state border. And the farmer's like, yeah, we'd love to give it a shot. So those farmers show up, this thing starts, and it is huge. Okay. It starts just taking off, and now they're opening up different locations in the city with these farmers markets. And now, of course, the Kentucky farmers see what's going on. They're like, wait a minute, we're Kentucky farmers, we want to be there. And it's like, well, wait a minute, we understand that, but you didn't want to be part of this before. Let us go talk to the Southern Indiana farmers and see if they're willing to do that. Well, the Southern Indiana farmers said, this is now 40% of our revenue. Like, these farmers markets are now, we want to do more of this everywhere. Okay. So this is not just because of the pandemic. This is that whole community agriculture, farm to table movement, and it's been here for a little while. That story's 12 years old.
I think you're right. I think it is a forced accelerant, though. For example, the changes in the industry over the past, just over the pandemic, accelerated up to 5 years of growth in the industry. With things, this is a Pittsburgh farmer who's telling us this, by using online platforms for ordering and apps, and just the technological changes that really advanced it. This is an industry that wasn't embracing technology. That you know how it is when you go to a farmer's market. Some of them might have a square, and an iPad that you can run your credit card through, but some of them don't. Some farmers markets, you buy little wooden tokens and you can't use cash. And they quickly realize, we've got to do what the restaurants are doing. We need to move to online menus, let people order ahead of time and just come and pick up. And some of the other things, and that adaptation of technology was forced by the pandemic, and which is really allowing their businesses to thrive.
And we've seen this technology not just in the delivery of the food. We've also seen in the growing of the food that there's a local grower in southern Anne Arundel County, Maryland, who has for years gotten the most advanced technology from Israel, because remember, Israel is farming in desert and they're having to do this. They brought that over and built their greenhouses with this. And these things are so technologically advanced that the people doing the growing aren't testing anything. It's all set up where it tests the water, it tests the sun, it rotates based on sun, how much water, it captures every piece of waste. It is the most hyper efficient growth model in the growing process, right? And it's amazing. If you tour this thing, it's like a mission to Mars kind of thing. Like, this is how they're going to, when we go to Mars, they're going to start growing food there using this technology. And that, from a perspective, like our perception of farmers is it's always the same thing. You go out, you till the field, you plant some seeds, some big equipment comes in, you grow, you roll over, right? But the technology available in the growing is extremely high now and extremely efficient. But that being moved over to the delivery piece, right? If the only way to deliver is to get into grocery stores, then you're at the mercy of the whole supply chain. But if you break out of that supply chain and you find ways to deliver directly, great. And I think that's what the farmers markets and some of these CSAs and all have done. But now we look at Amazon and what Amazon's doing right now with just delivering stuff right to your door. And so the local movement has to sort of keep up. So they are, I think, being very innovative in how they're going to get us that food and how they're going to have us pay for that food. And what is the membership to have access to that food? It's all very innovative.
So interesting that you just said that, because Oak Spring Farm is here in Maryland, and the owner, Lisa Duff, she actually started offering customized at-home deliveries last year. And she said that really saved her when the restaurants that she used to fulfill orders for, were closed in March. So that exact approach, Amazon will deliver to your door. So will some of these local CSAs and farms. So I think it's incumbent upon us to support our local community agriculture. We want to keep this going, and to recognize that if we want this trend to continue, it makes so much sense. We're not just talking about getting more healthier nutrition, being local, not having it picked before it's shipped, and saving our environment by not having that fuel expense. I mean, there's so many just environmental benefits, but economic benefits of buying local. Hopefully this is just one piece of the puzzle that'll help us create a sustainable local food.
And it connects us back to the food we're eating, right? The whole ecotourism thing is an interesting thing too. And I'm sorry, not ecotourism. The whole agro-tourism thing is an interesting thing too. And you see that with a lot of these food stands and all, where they do the corn maze, and then they have you go pick it yourself type of stuff. And they've got the little educational setups and little fake tractors for the kids to play on. And the idea that folks want to go pick their own, like that is now not just food, but there's an entertainment component. And it's people, I think, are now starting to touch the food more, see where it grows, understand what this means. And you're talking about, it's not just cooking the new recipes. I mean, that's right there, but let's go see where the ingredients come from. Let's go learn what that actually is. What is a purple turnip? And, all of that is working together to make this movement continue. But I think the local farmers and local businesses who are trying to create this sustainable local community need to be careful of losing that hold. Because remember what happened with the organic movement, right? As soon as that was popularized, all of a sudden, every large scale entity out there had their organic brand. And saying organic began to be dumbed down to the point where it didn't really mean much anymore. When you go to the farmer's market and you're buying local, if you come upon a bunch of plums that have little stickers on them, they were bought at the store, right? And so I'm not saying you shouldn't buy those, but let's keep the awareness of what we're dealing with and what we're trying to accomplish as the consumer.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm energized by hearing these stories of local farms that are finding success and doing well, and I'm definitely motivated to keep up my participation in that process, because it's just a small thing that we can do for those people who are trying to feed us, and I think that they are deserving of our support.
I think they are deserving of our support, and I think if we want all those things we claim to want, right, which is our standards of livings in our community, if we want that health piece, how unhealthy our society supposedly is, if we want to get to that, then working with these folks who are a direct line to that is something that it's incumbent upon us to do that, to interact and all. I was part of a CSA probably 5 years ago that at the end of the year, all members got to go to the gleaning of the fields, right? So we got to show up and help pick the last picking and clear out the fields and take whatever we had. And it was so funny that they were able to get all these folks who were so jazzed to go do the work they didn't want to do, right? But we're all, yay, because we had a great year with your CSA and we like you guys, and this sounds like fun. Let's get all our kids and everybody around and go down and do the dirty work. And it felt good. But they have to be thinking, wow, these folks really have no clue, do they?
I don't know why, Patrick, but you saying that just reminds me of the I Love Lucy where they're pressing the grapes.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So when we look at this, Laura, I think we've kind of shown how this industry is adapting and how it's kind of unique. But what's the takeaway lessons from it for everybody else? Because it does feel almost like, we all seem to have a connection to food in a way that the family farm and the local, farm to table kind of thing has some sort of resonance with everybody. That doesn't always translate as well to some of the retail and the local, like people are, Amazon's too convenient, the price is too good, I'm just going to do it. But with this, we're going to go glean the fields and we're going to pay more knowingly. What's the lessons to be learned from this that translate to other business industries?
Patrick, the takeaway I had, because, I read several different articles about this, is finding a ray of hope. There are so many reasons for farmers to not have hope, just being, beaten down over and over and over again from a variety of different directions. If farmers can find a ray of hope and can pivot their business models, embrace new technologies, new delivery mechanisms, and new products, and try and fill a need, every industry should be able to look at that model to do the same. Banding together is something that small farms have done really, really well. All small businesses need to band together. Some of the things that we're pulling out of here, we've pulled out time and time again, whether we're talking about a local shopping center, whether we're talking about the local restaurant industry, whether we're talking about local downtown businesses, reaching across to one another and building those alliances, talking to one another and supporting each other, looking at new technologies and new ways of doing business. So I think all of these things are transferable. And mostly, I think it's attitude. You've got to be the change you want to see. And if you're passionate about your industry, and there's no other reason for farmers to be in it, they're in it because they're passionate about it. There's hope.
Yeah, and I think you see that too with the older farmers, because you've seen a lot of the farming families. It was passed down from generation to generation, and now all of a sudden the younger folks are like, we don't want to do this. And there's this whole movement of getting people to come back to farming, and what are those benefits? And that passion is what will save that industry. And I think what you just said is absolutely accurate. The passion for that local business, that hands-on approach, the we're all in this together piece, that has to be what we rally around.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Okay.
All right, everybody. This was another edition of the Spark Business Institute's Reigniting Small Business podcast with Laura Richards and Patrick Lee. Thanks for joining us today.
Bye, everybody.